Lesser known facts about the Pumpkinhead franchise. What happens when a special effects maestro tries his hand at directing a monster-based horror flick? Well, the results are there for all to see, as Stan Winston's directorial debut impressed everyone with its quirky and entertaining concept. He was the one to turn to for the most challenging effects, and from Jurassic Park to Alien to Predator, his long list of work has formed a legacy in cinema. The story revolving around the vengeful, monstrous Pumpkinhead was intimidating and enjoyable at the same time, and it went on to become a cult classic. With 3 sequels and over 30 years later, the horror fans still remember the guilty pleasure on offer, and the 1988 monster flick certainly turned a few heads courtesy of Stan Winston's unique designs. Coming back to Pumpkinhead, the demon was summoned by a father looking to get revenge on those who killed his son. However, he quickly realized that the powerful demon had to be stopped before it was too late, and thus began the murderous rampage that ended with a bang. While Pumpkinhead in itself is criminally underrated, we chose to dive deeper and bring you some behind-the-scenes trivia and lesser-known facts about the movie that will surely make it more fun to watch next time. With a reboot currently in the works, now is the time to learn about the intricate details that fueled the film and spawned a franchise. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The journey from a special effects expert to a filmmaker. Stan Winston had already established himself as one of the finest special effects experts going around. His work in the Terminator series, Aliens, and the first few Jurassic Park movies had earned him quite a reputation, and it did not come as a surprise when he was approached for designing the monstrous creature Pumpkinhead. However, Stan Winston had other ideas, and he finally decided to take the plunge and direct the movie himself. He even developed the script, worked personally on the creature designs, and made it a grand success. Since he was so familiar with the special effects department, it also helped him in controlling the budget of the movie, and it did not shoot past the allocations. The cast and crew later revealed that he was a fun guy to be around, and the sets were fun and lively during the filming process. We all know happy workers mean good work, don't we? Given that his directorial skills were on point, it is unfortunate that he did not direct more movies. His next directorial venture was a movie called A Gnome, named Norm, and it wasn't a huge hit either. We are sure that with the right kind of support, he could have been as legendary a director as he was a special effects maestro. A creepy poem inspired the movie. This is not something we hear every day, a horror flick being inspired by a poem. But that is exactly what happened for Pumpkinhead, which found inspiration in a creepy poem written by Ed Justin. The poem talks about a horrifying entity named Pumpkinhead, which is invincible and gets to its victims by hook or by crook. It establishes Pumpkinhead as a ruthless creature that derives joy from getting revenge, and no amount of preparation can save one from its wrath. While the poem was not specifically written for the movie, Ed Justin is still credited as a writer for the movie, and the ominous tone in the lines did help in conjuring one of the most remarkable monsters in horror history. The original title wasn't Pumpkinhead. You would think that the name Pumpkinhead would come naturally to the creators, especially because it was inspired by a poem talking about the terrifying creature Pumpkinhead. However, that was clearly not the case, and the initial title was Vengeance the Demon. It was kind of in your face, and thankfully the name did not stick. When De Laurentiis Entertainment Group filed for bankruptcy, United Artists came into the picture and they went ahead with a fresh title. Eventually it was decided that the movie would go ahead with the title Pumpkinhead, and while it is undoubtedly a peculiar name for a horror film, it is any day better than something as pretentious as Vengeance the Demon. The supernatural demon was made to have a resemblance with Lance Henrikson. The true demons and monsters lie within humans. It is a saying that has been utilized time and time again by monster flicks, and Pumpkinhead goes on similar lines. The first appearance of the monster presented him as something like a mutant child, but with time, it started to look more human, with a clear resemblance to Lance Henrikson, who played the role of Ed Harley. He He was the one to summon the monster to get his revenge, and it was a way of showing how his vengeful outlook had blinded him about certain basic ethics. Pumpkinhead was basically blended into the corrupted and troubled soul of Ed, and it just went on to signify how the real monsters were only created from human trauma. It has to be said that the monster's design was astoundingly perfect, and you simply cannot imagine seeing practical effects like this in today's CGI-fueled cinema culture. Lance Henrikson wasn't too keen on the role. Stan Winston was already familiar with working alongside Lance Henrikson for movies like Terminator and Alien. When his opportunity to finally direct a movie opened up, he was quick to approach the actor for the lead role of Ed Hartley. However, the actor was in a dilemma about whether or not to accept the role. For starters, the title did not convince him, and he was worried that it could end up being a laughingstock. It all changed after he had gone through the entire script and realized the seriousness of the role. One scene in particular, where his dead son appears before him and questions his actions, convinced him that the lead role offered him a challenge that he was willing to take up. We're glad about how things turned out because he was impeccable while portraying the character. The movie was not an instant hit. We might be hailing Pumpkinhead for being a cult classic today, but back when it released, it didn't exactly set the cash boxes jingling. It had a limited release initially, and even after the proper release, the makers barely made back the money spent in filming. One of the main reasons behind the box office failure of the movie was the lack of proper marketing and promotions. The De Laurentiis Entertainment Group faced a major financial collapse, and hence the movie lacked the budget to go all out during the promotional events. It also caused the initial limited release, and the company lacked the right kind of experts to sell the film by making it lucrative for the audience. The dull poster lacked the kind of artwork that would interest the fans, and overall, it took some time before the movie finally got the appreciation it deserved.
Pumpkinhead
teared off his head and drank all the blood.
did not. Did too.
Sheldon Cooper's girlfriend made her debut. The Big Bang Theory was one of the biggest sitcoms in recent times, and Mayim Bialik is a familiar face for many for her role in the show as Sheldon Cooper's girlfriend. While she is a well-known global star at present, her rise to stardom was through a journey filled with struggle. She has roots in horror, and her first acting role in a movie was in Pumpkinhead. She plays the role of a young girl who meets the group of teens at Ed Hartley's grocery store towards the beginning of the movie. She did have a relatively small role, but it was an impactful performance that got her started. It would be a good few years till she bagged the role of her lifetime in The Big Bang Theory, but these strange starting stories for big names are always fun to hear. The cabin might seem familiar. If you happen to be a Friday the 13th fan, the cabin where the teenagers stay in Pumpkinhead will seem all too familiar. This is because the makers chose to shoot in the same location as Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. The Jarvis house in that movie is the same cabin used here, and it is quite a famous location that has been used in several other films and TV shows. The iconic location is actually in Kelly Gulch in Topanga, California, and the beautifully maintained cabin was an asset for those looking for offbeat locations. Apparently, people could also rent the cabin for weddings or other special occasions. The Pumpkinhead makers couldn't have found a better location for the fateful house.
I know you can do it. It's the only way. You got no choice.
I love you.
Lance Henrikson regretted being a part of the sequels. As is the case with most movies that gain some popularity, Pumpkinhead spawned a few sequels along the way. While Pumpkinhead 2 Blood Wings got some love from the fans, the following two movies didn't exactly have the same kind of reviews. Lance Henrikson reprised his role as Ed Hartley in both these films, and he later regretted choosing to be a part of them. He went on record to call them shitty and revealed that he was once so embarrassed after the screening of the movie that he snuck out of the theater, avoiding a Q&A session in order to avoid the audience. The third movie in particular, Pumpkinhead Ashes to Ashes, was criticized for being a cheap addition to the franchise. While the sequels still have a loyal fanbase, it would be unfair to even draw a comparison with the original, which has truly been the highlight of the Pumpkinhead movie series.
What's your name? Billy, this is my dog Gypsy. Oh, hey Gypsy.
The movie used the same dog as Gremlins. You must have noticed the dog named Gypsy in Pumpkinhead. Well, as it turns out, the dog is quite an experienced actor who also starred in Gremlins. The adorable golden retriever played the role of Billy's pet Barney in Gremlins, and in Pumpkinhead, the friendly canine impressed once again. The real name of the dog is Mushroom, and everyone on the sets grew extremely fond of the dog because of its loving nature, not to mention his flawless acting skills. There is a comic strip based on the horror franchise. Back in 1993, Dark Horse Comics came up with a comic series spanning only 2 issues. It had a slightly different take on the Pumpkinhead demon as seen in the movies, and there was supposed to be a 3rd issue which would explore a winged version of the creature. It wasn't really mind-blowing, but it still promised to be a decent read, especially for the fans. Later, Cullen Bunn recreated the magic of the evil demon once again in the pages of a comic book. Once again, the artwork is not really impressive, and neither is the narrative. The plot is simply a poor rehash of the movies, and all it does is simply expand the Pumpkinhead universe with some more background about the demon. The Pumpkinhead video game is not exactly perfect. After the release of the second Pumpkinhead movie titled Bloodwings, a game titled Bloodwings: Pumpkinhead's Revenge was developed by an American studio called BAP Interactive. It was published by Electronic Arts for DOS, and the game was largely based on the movie. It is a first-person shooter, and several video clips from the movie have been utilized throughout the gameplay. Unfortunately, it was not well received by the gaming community, and people called it a poor ripoff of Doom. The random, grainy video clips did not help, and the controls were clunky and difficult to use. Even the graphics were rather mediocre, and the creatures don't really look appealing. Clearly, the idea to cash in on the success of a franchise doesn't always work out as planned. Our final words. We have already mentioned the impact that Pumpkinhead had on the creature horror genre. It was a defining work of art by the late Stan Winston, who will always be remembered as one of the greatest in his field of expertise. After the last 2 sequels fared poorly among the fans, there were talks about the possible closure of the franchise. Luckily, a remake was planned in 2017, and even though the project was stuck for quite some time, it finally looks like we might have a proper reboot going ahead. Paramount Pictures have always done their best in the horror genre, and it seems like they are keeping up with the tradition with their new venture. While you wait for the movie to be released, do let us know in the comments below about the facts that surprise you the most. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.